Dawn hovered pale and anxious above the red-tiled roofs of King's Landing, gilding every narrow lane and crooked chimney with a glow too gentle for what the day would demand. Sansa Stark, no, Sansa Lannister by mere decree and nightmare, stood before her chamber's single high window, fingers pressed to the cool stone sill, as if the city beneath were a brittle pane she might shatter with a touch. Bells had not yet begun their jubilant racket for the royal wedding, but she could feel the hour drawing close, as undeniable as the pull of the tides. Somewhere in the distance, a gull barked, brusque and mocking, and the protest stirred something restless under her ribs. She drew back from the window and crossed to the little cedar chest at her bedside. Inside, beneath a fold of pale lavender silk, waited the most terrible gift the city had ever granted her. A tiny glass phial, no longer than the span of her thumb, filled with violet grains that shimmered like powdered amethysts. The Strangler, Dantos had called it, his wine-thick breath reeking of fear and hope in equal measure. A single drop upon the tongue, and the victim's throat would lock itself around air that was suddenly colder, crueler, impossible to draw. He had pressed it upon her the evening before, when the sun was sinking blood-red behind the Blackwater, and the salt breeze carried the damp ghost of burnt ships. "One drop, sweet lady," he'd whispered, fumbling the phial into her palm. "One drop, and he'll never hurt you again." Dantos had stank of stale wine, but sobriety had sharpened his desperation. "Then meet me after the feast, by the old shipyard. I'll carry you to safety." He'd sworn it upon the memory of the knight he had once been, upon the battered honor clinging to his rust-eaten helm. Sansa had not told him she had spent long hours weighing the phial in her hand, not as a hostage of dread but as a warded blade. She had knelt before the dark oak trunk of her bed, head bowed as if in prayer, but the words she mouthed were not a maiden's plea for mercy. They were a widow's promise, spoken to the ghosts of Eddard and Catelyn Stark, to Robb, whose crown of wolf's fur lay forever in the ashes of the twins. "I will not remain his plaything. I will not be silenced. Winter may be far from these golden shores, but I will carry its chill within me, sharp and patient as ice." Now, as gray-pink dawn bled into full sunrise, she unwrapped the phial and slipped it into a hidden pocket beneath the lace of her sleeve. Her hands were steady. That astonished her most. The girl who had wept each night for songs and chivalry might have trembled. The girl who had thought love flowed as sweetly as arbor gold could not have borne the weight of murder. But that girl had died beside her father on Baelor's steps. In her place lived someone who understood that monsters did not lurk only in tales, but sat upon thrones and wore crowns of sharpened roses. Ian Dendau. The sept of Baelor seethed with color and perfume. Stripes of Tyrell green and gold, streaks of crimson Lannister silk, white velvet of the Kingsguard stark against marbled pillars. The sweet, cloying incense drifting above the throng reminded Sansa of 1,000 bees trapped in a summer greenhouse, their frantic wings thickening the air. Music rose from a dozen hidden alcoves, but it all fled through the vaulted ceiling and left only a tremor in her bones. She felt as though she were wading through honey, every step syrup slow, yet events whisked ahead of her with dizzying haste, promises spoken, blessings invoked, the High Septon's words drowned by a tide of approving murmur. Marguerite Tyrell glowed brighter than every candelabrum, her smile scattering warm light upon the gawkers. Joffrey Baratheon. No, the boy was no Baratheon. But traitorous truth could not be spoken here. Beamed beside his bride, golden hair a match to his polished crown, he squeezed Marguerite's hand often. Not in tenderness but in private emphasis. "See, I hold the future House Tyrell in my grasp." His purple eyes slid toward Sansa more than once, amusement and cruelty swirling together. Because she was the North's pretty hostage, the caged wolf forced to applaud. "Let her watch what she'll never have," those eyes gloated. Finally the ceremony collapsed beneath its own pomp, spilling guests out into the breezy courtyard beyond the sept. The wedding feast awaited atop the wide terrace, overlooking the Blackwater. Trestle tables creaking under the weight of quail dipped in honey. Peacocks roasted whole with jeweled tails. Wheels of cheese cut to resemble the faces of the seven. Servants bearing ewers of wine darted between lords and ladies, whose laughter clanged like silver goblets knocked together. Sansa moved among them as a shadow in lilac silk. Danto's last instructions stung her ears. Slip the grains into his grace's cup when the betting songs begin, when the hall is thick with drunken eyes that see nothing. But music was already spilling from lutes and flutes, and Joffrey's appetite for cruelty could never wait for custom. He perched upon the high dais like a young dragon eyeing lesser meat, crowing taunts at the dwarf who stood below. The imp commanded to perform a fool's comedy for the king's delight. Tyrion Lannister took it with stoic silence, voice subdued, lips tight. Yet a faint tremor gleamed in his mismatched eyes when Joffrey beckoned him to fetch wine. Sansa watched, pulse a lonely drum in her throat. When Tyrion returned with the heavy wedding chalice, she saw the king's pale fingers pounce upon the stem, felt the moment hitch. Now, the cup traveled from Tyrion's grip to the king's lips. One sip, a satisfied smack, and Joffrey thrust it back for more. He leaned down, shadows deepening the hollows beneath his cheekbones, and sneered at his uncle. Kneel! The hall knew how this game ended. Servants and singers stilled, retaining only the hush of breaths drawn against teeth. Tyrion did not yield. He set the cup on the table, refusal stark as winter stone. Joffrey's smile curdled. He beckoned for the chalice anew. A passing squire fumbled the goblet into his grasp. Sansa caught the faintest tremor of purple grain, slipping from the inside of her sleeve, tumbling into that swirl of Dornish red, dissolving like mist in hot daylight. No one saw. Their eyes were affixed to Tyrion's rebellion, to the promise of a public shaming, perhaps worse. Joffrey drank deep, triumphant, and clapped his palms. "I toast," he declared, voice ringing above the music. "To my uncle, the new cup-bearer. May he serve his king until he's too old to crawl." Guests laughed, uneasy. Tyrion inclined his head with cold courtesy, then stepped aside. Sansa's veins sang. The heartbeat of a mother wolf at full run thundered in her ears. The effect was not immediate. Joffrey tossed his head back and drained what remained, slamming the cup upon polished oak. He opened his mouth to summon another jest, but his voice snagged mid-taunt. A shrill squeak swallowed by silence. A cough followed, short and surprised, like a boy caught stealing sweets. He lifted one hand toward his throat. Another cough, fierce now, then a rasp that peeled the merriment from the room. All watched as wine spilled from the corner of his lips, dribbling crimson down his chin. Panic scuttled across the terrace. Margaery reached for him. He shoved her aside, eyes bulging, veins standing taut as drawn bowstrings. The coughs became convulsions, dry, wretched heaves that yielded only air and froth. He clawed at his collar, rending silk and stitching. Someone screamed. The Queen Mother, perhaps, though Sansa could not find Cersei's face within the blur. Joffrey stumbled down from the dais, knees striking flagstone with a crack that echoed. He looked suddenly small, a pale wisp lost within his own armor, reaching out to invisible hands. And then his gaze snagged on Sansa Stark. He tried to speak. No word came, only a wet hiss. Terror, incomprehension, a plea that even wolves might pity. She saw them all flicker in his eyes. She felt a moment's trembling, not of remorse, but of the weight of choice, the knowledge that a she-wolf had decided a king's last breath. Yet the memory of her father's head on the spike flared so bright it scorched hesitation clean away. Joffrey's body convulsed one final time. He collapsed upon the stones, fingers scrabbling, face modeling to an awful violet that mocked the shade of the very poison within him. Silent horror washed over the wedding crowd, a tide receding and leaving behind only shards of disbelief. Sansa turned. The terrace had become a storm of shouted orders, clustering guards, shrieking ladies. In that spinning maelstrom she vanished through a garden arch, walking swift and straight as though carried by the hush of winter winds. Her lilac skirts whispered over gravel. A stable boy dashed across her path, chasing a runaway dog, and saw nothing but a noble woman, fleeing a scene too gory for gentle eyes. At the outer stables, where the scents of hay and horseflesh mingled, dusk already colored the air, though the sun hung barely past its zenith. She slipped inside a stall where a great sand-colored destrier stamped and snorted. "Stranger," Sandor Clegane called him. The hound was gone from King's Landing, fled the night of wildfire. But the beast remained, prized for his strength by the master of horse. Few dared ride him. Sansa had overheard that he bit men who smelled of fear. Yet when she approached, her pulse carried not fear but iron. She stroked his muzzle once. Stranger's dark eyes measured her, recognizing perhaps a kindred orphan of violence. He bent his head, as if offering. Sansa saddled him with clumsy urgency, fumbling straps the way Arya had once scolded her for ignoring. Memories of her sister's quick, capable hands hardened her resolve. Stranger huffed, but stood. She slung herself into the worn leather seat, skirts bunched, feet finding stirrups too large. Then she guided him through the rear gate the stable hands used, a small arch seldom guarded. The moment the city sprawled before her, bells erupted behind like an alarm of demons. Rang not for wedding jubilance now, but mourning and fury. They tolled as if the sept's very bones rattled. Cersei would be screaming. Guards would be summoned. Gates sealed, ships scoured. And Tyrion, gods. The queen would seize upon blame as a drowning woman claws for driftwood. He would become scapegoat. And Sansa knew the imp's cunning mind might discern the truth. Yet she could not look back. She nudged Stranger into a trot, then a canter, weaving through alleyways that stank of fish guts and tanner vats. Shouts rose behind, but most citizens gaped toward the Red Keep's distant silhouette, where bells clanged like broken anvils. No one noticed the slim girl on the great warhorse, head lowered, cloak hood drawn. At Mudgate, the queue of wagons stretched long. Traders eager to leave, before the city's grief curdled into riot. She rode past them, flashing a ring no longer upon her finger, but secreted in her palm. Joffrey's betrothal band, slipped free during one of his rough games. The guards glimpsed its glint, bowed without question, and waved her through. Hammers slammed the portcullis closed behind her, even as Stranger's hooves pounded the dirt. Lender. The King's Road opened like a gray ribbon between fields newly tilled for spring. Clouds gathered low, bruised plum and slate, heralding a storm. Stranger's breath steamed in the chill. The rhythm of his gallop matched the frenzy of Sansa's thoughts. Each stride carried her farther from the memory of a dying king, yet deeper into unknown country where winter wolves might find no welcome. She pressed low against the horse's neck, braids fluttering, cloak snapping. A day's hard ride would bring her to the crossroads inn. Beyond lay the Trident, then the Neck, and the haunted ruins of Moat Cailin. She had studied maps once with Maester Luwin. The distances lived now within her, like whispered roots etched on bone. Yet to survive them, she would need coin, shelter, perhaps the aid of ghosts kinder than those haunting Casterly Rock. Dusk chased her, blue shadows pooling beneath the barren oaks flanking the road. Insects sang a thin dirge. Stranger slowed only at a creek where mossy stones broke the current, lowering his muzzle to drink. Sansa dismounted, legs trembling with the shock of stillness. She knelt to refill her water skin, cupping cold liquid to her lips, and stared at her reflection trembling in the ripples. The face gazing back was not the courteous maiden once praised for Tully beauty. Dust streaked her cheeks, wind burned them raw. Her eyes, once bright with songs, wore storm clouds now. She unsheathed the slender dirk stolen from the stable wall. A weak weapon, but steel nonetheless. She turned it in her palm, feeling its weight. Not long ago, she would have sought rescue. A kindly knight, a mother's embrace. But rescue was a child's wish. Protection must be seized, not granted. Night pressed around her, the sky thick with bruised thunderheads. She guided Stranger into a thicket of willows, where branches drooped like mourners' veils. There she tethered him, and settled upon a bed of last autumn's leaves. Wolves howled in the distance, real wolves perhaps, or men wearing cloaks of gray fur and darker intent. She drew her cloak tight and closed her eyes. Sleep came not in gentle waves, but as a jagged icy sea, dragging her beneath. In dreams, she stood on the terrace again, Joffrey's bulging eyes fixed upon her, but she did not flinch. She met his gaze and watched understanding flicker. You. Then the dream shattered, and she fell through starless dark. Sandor. Dawn was a steel blade across the sky when Sansa rose. A thin rain misted the air, beating upon Stranger's mane. She ate a heel of bread and a bite of hard cheese, remnants pilfered from the feast's table in the chaos. The taste of arbor gold lingered on her tongue, a phantom memory of victory. She mounted and urged him onward, northward. Every mile pressed the king's screams deeper into memory, replaced by other worries. Would ravens fly already? Posters bearing her likeness nailed to every inn door? She must alter her appearance. She considered hacking her hair short, but hesitated. The auburn strands were her mother's gift. Instead, she braided them tight against her skull and concealed them beneath a hood of plain brown. At the Crossroads Inn, she would trade silks for homespun, rings for copper pennies, yet unease gnawed. What if Dantos waited where he had promised, unaware she had never needed his rescue? A drunkard but no monster. Would he be punished for aiding her? The thought pricked, but she buried it. The wheel of fate seldom spared the weak. She could not ransom her freedom for a fool's skin. Midday, the King's Road bent through a stretch of low marsh, where muddy pools reflected ragged clouds. From the corner of her eye, she glimpsed riders cresting a distant rise. 5 perhaps, cloaks flaring scarlet beneath flickering torch coats of mail. Lannister read. Patrols already. Bells tolled in her mind again. She steered Stranger off the road and into the reeds, crouching close to his neck. They splashed through muck that sucked at hooves, cattails whipping past. Crackling laughter floated from the patrol as they galloped southward, eager to reach King's Landing and whatever bounty the Queen would promise. When their hoofbeats faded, she guided Stranger west, threading a crooked path through bog and bramble, until the road's white gravel blurred into the murk behind her. Hours passed, measured only by the horse's labored breathing and the dull ache spreading through her thighs. Memories flicked like sparrows. The feel of Winterfell's snowmelt trickling beneath her palms. Arya's jeers as she tried to mount Lady for the first time. Her mother's voice singing soft over father's deep laughter during harvest feasts. The north was chill and stern, yet every recollection glowed warm. She would reclaim it, inch by brutal inch. By nightfall, the Crossroads Inn loomed, a crooked silhouette tucked among birch and elm. Candlelight flickered through leaded panes. Sansa tethered Stranger beneath a lean toe, rubbed him down with straw, and whispered gratitude. Then she drew the hood low and stepped inside. The common room buzzed with travelers nursing watery ale and rumors of royal dread. Kings choked on his own arrogance, they say, a pock-marked merchant hissed, coaxing laughter. Some say the imp poisoned him, another shouted. Stark girl vanished too, muttered a man in rusty mail, eyes flicking about as if she might sprout from the floorboards. Sansa slipped toward the hearth, keeping shadows as allies. She purchased a trencher of rabbit stew and a flagon of small beer with coin from a purse plucked off a drunken reveler during her escape. The innkeep spared her only bored indifference. She wolfed the meal, savoring its warmth, ears pricked for mention of search parties. Talk was chaotic, contradictory. Blackwater Bay sealed, ships halted, gates locked. Yet she was already miles beyond their net. In a corner by the chimney, a weather-worn hedge knight fussed with his saddle girths, muttering about ransom for northern roads. He looked at her only once, noting the plain cloak, the dirt upon her cheeks. Safe travels, girl, he grunted without suspicion. His kindness loosened something tight within her chest, a reminder that not every stranger bore fangs. She bartered her last silver stag for a loft bed amid musty hay. Sleep came quicker than fear this time, heavy and dreamless until a crash of thunder wrenched her awake. Lightning flashed against the shutter slats, bleaching the loft in ghost white. Rain hammered the roof, a deafening drum. She listened for hooves on muddy ground, but only wind howled. Stranger nickered below. She whispered soothing nonsense, learned from old Nan, and the storm passed. Morning unveiled a world scrubbed clean. She left before dawn after trading the lilac gown, now mud-stained, for a coarse wool dress and cloak the color of moss. She turned Joffrey's betrothal ring into the innkeep for a handful of silver pennies, keeping only the unadorned gold band of her supposed marriage. A silent mocking trophy. Northward again. The road narrowed, bordered by pine that lent the air a scent like home. The next damp chill kissed her cheeks. Marshes rose and fell beside her, fog curling thick. She could almost believe the ghosts of the children of the forest walked there, watching an exiled wolf return. Days layered atop days. Strangers' hooves chewed leagues, and Sansa's thoughts became steadier, bolder. She practiced drawing the dirk in one motion, rehearsed lies for toll-takers, daughter of a Tarth trader, kin to a minor Frey, and wove each mile with small prayers to the old gods, to the heart trees whose faces she had once feared. "Let me reach the north," she begged. "Let me stand beneath a bough of red leaves, and lay my secrets at your roots." At dusk on the 7th day, long after the last settlement had dwindled to scattered hovels, she reached a low hill crowned by a ring of ancient oaks. There she halted, breath frosting in twilight. Beyond stretched the neck's endless wetland, a patchwork of pools and bog islands where reeds swayed like armies of spears. In the far distance rose the faint silhouette of Moat Caelan's battered towers, guardians of the passage into the north. Fear nudged her ribs. Stories spoke of ironborn wights haunting those black stones, of poison arrows shot from unseen angles by the crannogmen. Yet she could not tarry. Lannister gold would sluice across the realm, hunting the wolf who had gnawed at the lion's heart. She dismounted to rest stranger, and gathered fallen sticks, kindling a small fire cupped by stones. As embers crackled, she pulled from her pouch a strip of parchment torn from Maester Pacel's loose-leaf ledger, one of many pages she'd stolen during her docile days in the Red Keep's library. Upon it she began to write with a shard of charcoal, a letter not to be sent, but to anchor her rising tide of memory. Mother, father, Robb, Bran, Arya, Rickon, I have done a terrible thing. The flames licked the edges as she wrote, but she did not flinch. I have freed the realm of a monster. I have drowned the songs of my girlhood in blood. If I must carry that weight alone, so be it. But if the North still lives in me, guide me home. Guide me through marsh and shadow until direwolf banners snap beneath skies of gray snow. Your daughter comes, heart forged in wildfire and cooled by storm. She fed the letter to the flames when she finished, watching Inca-black words curl into smoke that danced upward like newborn ghosts. Ash drifted to rest upon her skirts. She brushed it away and lay upon her cloak, stranger's warmth at her back, Moat Caelan's jagged teeth on the horizon. The night was silent, save for the hush of marsh winds. Yet in that hush, she thought she heard the soft, measured footfalls of a great hound pacing the shadows. Guarding, perhaps, or judging. She closed her eyes and let the sound rock her toward sleep. A lullaby of claws clicking against stone. Dusty. When dawn slid pale and silver across the flooded plains, Sansa saddled stranger and rode for Moat Caelan. Mist clung to the ruins, so dense it seemed a living wall. She slowed, heart hammering. The air tasted of brine and rot, salt water trapped in crumbling mortar. She guided stranger along a narrow causeway, half submerged. The keep's shattered gatehouse loomed ahead, twisted iron portcullis gaping like a maw. An arrow thudded into the mud at her horse's forehoof. She reined in sharply. From the fog's whiteness emerged a figure swathed in reeds and leather, water dripping from slimed boots. "Halt," he called, voice lilting like lake reed whistles. Another appeared on the opposite bank, bow drawn steady. Crannogmen, all. She remembered tales of their loyalty to House Stark, but caution needled her tongue. "Who rides?" the first demanded, though his eyes rested on her mount's great size and the fine, if mud-spattered, saddle. A southern lady fleeing, or prey fat with ransom. Sansa drew breath. "A traveler seeking passage north," she replied, pitch low. "No quarrel." The bowman's gaze narrowed. "No coin can buy safe road here, only truth." He nodded at the wolf's head clasp upon her cloak. "That token's weighty enough. Speak your name." Her heart stumbled. She could lie, spin tales of umber kin. But to cross this gateway, perhaps truth must walk unmasked. She lifted her chin and felt the tattoo of winter in her pulse. "I am Sansa Stark of Winterfell," she said, voice steady as a drawn blade. "Daughter of Eddard Stark and Catelyn Tully. I ride for home." Silence stretched like ice over a pond. Then the bow lowered. The fog figure inclined his head, half bow, half pipelage. "Then the neck shall not swallow you," he said. "Follow us. We will guide you neath the causeway stones, where the marsh hides paths only we remember." Relief flooded her limbs so fiercely she might have wept. Yet tears had frozen too long. They would not thaw now. She nudged stranger forward. Crannogmen ghosts melted into view ahead, silent as reed cats. As she followed them beneath the shadow of Moat Cailin, a memory flickered. Her father's voice murmuring tales by the hearth. Of how the children carved faces into weirwood. Of how ancient first men swore oaths beneath red leaves. Of how the North remembers. Joffrey's dying eyes blurred. They would hunt her, brand her kingslayer, traitor, murderess. Let them. Here, in the chill breath of forgotten gods, her name beat stronger than any crown's decree. Sansa Stark rode on, cloak snapping like a banner in rising wind, strangers' hooves whispering secrets to the mud. She carried poison's ghost in her sleeve, winter's seed in her heart, and 500 northern miles yet to cross. Behind her the bells of King's Landing still tolled, faint as distant thunder, but growing fainter each hoofbeat. A requiem not only for a vicious boy-king, but for the girl she had once been. Ahead flowed a road of reed and fog and home. K-O-U-N. Rain fell like whispered confessions through the tangled branches overhead, each drop a cool kiss upon Sansa's cheeks as the Crannogmen guided her deeper into the neck. They moved in silence, marsh-colored cloaks blending with reeds and shadowed pools, feet finding half-submerged walkways so narrow she often expected strangers' hooves to slide sideways into black water. Yet the great warhorse obeyed the soft clicks of his mistress, nostrils flaring at every hint of brine, muscles bunching and relaxing beneath a sodden saddle. No names were exchanged that first day. The tallest of the marsh folk, a lean man whose hair hung in a hawk's tail down his spine, led the way, spear in hand, eyes flickering from path to mist, mistrusting any ripple that was not of his making. At his side danced a girl scarcely younger than Sansa, her boots wrapped in oiled leather, her bow strung across her back. A boy, perhaps her twin, followed at the rear with stranger's lead rope, loose in one hand. His gaze, steady and thoughtful, lingered often upon Sansa's face. When their eyes met, he offered a small, solemn nod, as though recognizing a fellow bearer of two heavy secrets. Near dusk, they reached a hummock topped by a stone circle, half swallowed in moss. There the marshfolk made camp, setting slim snares among cattails for frogs and eels. Sansa crouched beside the girl, mimicking quick twists of wire, letting silence stretch like thread between them until, at last, the girl spoke. "I am Mira," she said, voice soft but clear. "My brother is Jojen. Our father is Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater." She brushed hair from her brow with a frog-slicked hand, unbothered by mud. "He will want to speak with you before the night passes." Sansa's pulse skipped. Tales of Howland Reed were as mist-shrouded as the neck itself, and Stark's boyhood friend, the lone witness to Arthur Dayne's fall at the Tower of Joy. A man who walked the fine edge between Reed Witch lore and Bannerman's duty. If he mounted against Bolton treachery, perhaps her road home would not be walked alone. They shared a thin stew of eel and wild onion, flavored with strange herbs that turned the broth a bruised green. It tasted of lake water stirred with steel. Foreign, but oddly comforting. When bowls were scraped, clean Mira guided Sansa through the dripping reeds toward a stand of black willows. There, beneath low boughs glistening with rain, sat a man wrapped in layers of mottled leather. His hair, streaked moss and iron, clung damply to a brow tattooed with pale scars. Claw marks, perhaps, though none could say what beast had left them. He stood as they approached, studied Sansa through eyes the color of sunlit peat, and inclined his head. "Lady Stark," Howland Reed said, the title falling upon the marsh, hushed like a stone into water. "The neck remembers. The reeds bend for winter wolves." Old Manishand. Sansa swallowed the sudden tightness in her throat. "I am no lady here," she answered, voice low. "Only a girl carrying her father's name, and the weight of a crime she cannot unmake." Howland did not flinch. "I have heard the bells," he said, lips twisting. "The South is quick to trade blame. Poison blooms many rumors. Tell me your truth, and the neck will guard it." So she told him of Danto's phial, the tremor of grains swirling into crimson wine, the twitch of a boy king's throat sealing shut beneath his mother's screams. She told of strangers' stolen ride, of fears that flew swifter than arrows. When words faltered, she spoke of ice, of her father's head upon the walls, of Rob's crown shattered by treachery, of a girl forged in frost and wildfire, who chose to make monsters fear. And when her voice broke, Howland Reed laid a reed-light hand upon her shoulder, absorbing grief as soft moss drinks rain. "The gods weave gray threads," he murmured when her tale ended. "But sometimes they let mortals choose the darker dye. Joffrey's death will echo through courts and camps alike. Let echo serve the north. Nemo." He stepped back. "Greywater's halls drift upon the fen, hidden from those who would chain us. There you may rest, plan and heal. From there we will send whispers to the wolves left in hiding." His gaze hardened. "Bolton claws pierce Winterfell. Frey blades drip Stark blood, yet wolves endure. Your sister perhaps, your brother Bran." At their names she tensed. "You know of them." "Yogen dreams," Mira murmured, appearing at her father's side. "Green dreams that show roads unseen." He saw a wingless crow guiding Bran north of the wall. "We sought him once, but the dream's path changed. Now our spears may serve you first." "Istermaiden?" Hope and dread tangled in Sansa's chest. "If Bran lives, I must find him. But first the north must rise. Bolton keeps Winterfell hostage. He will not yield for morning songs." Howland Reed's smile was a blade. "Winter wolves hunt best in packs. You will not face him alone." They traveled by boat through narrow channels choked with algae, Greywater Watch appearing only when the fog chose to part. Low timber towers lashed to great rafts of woven rushes, drifting as though unmoored from time itself. Warriors with painted faces lifted torches, guiding stranger up a sloped plank until he stood upon swaying decking above black water. Sansa dismounted, knees wobbling from the rolling floor, and followed Mira across rope bridges linking the floating halls. Lanterns cast ripples of amber upon wet planks. Above, cormorants roosted like sentries. Howland Reed led her to a round chamber, where the air smelled of peat smoke and marsh herbs. There, beneath a weirwood mask carved in the shape of a wolf's face, he spread a map crudely inked on tanned fish skin. "Our scouts note flayed man banners at Winterfell," he said, tapping the parchment. "Bolton drills new levies, scours holdfasts for Stark loyalists. But fear breeds cracks. Karstark riders mutter of vengeance. Manderley ships fill hidden coves." Sansa leaned closer, tracing roads once etched in her childhood. "If Manderley turns, White Harbor can feed an army," she breathed. "But Karstark blood was split for Rob's death. We cannot assume." "Karstarks are wolves, however ill-starved," Reed replied. "Bolton flays, Frey betrays. Many would trade such lords for one of their own." He met her gaze. "The question, will they trade for you?" She thought of the girl who had embroidered lions upon golden cloth, dreaming of tourneys. That girl's hand would tremble before raising a Northman's banner. But the girl who tipped poison into a king's chalice had steadier fingers. "I will not hide," she said. "I will ride beneath the dire wolf and call the banners. If they follow, we march. If not, I still ride." Howland's eyes warmed with pride unspoken. "A daughter of Ned Stark speaks thus. Yet we must arm you with more than name. The Reach stands with the Iron Throne. For now. Baratheon lords may split. Lannister coffers rattle near empty. Word of your deed already fractures their unity. We must fan that crack." He produced a sealed reed tube. "A letter written in your hand, signed with the direwolf, confessing to Joffrey's murder. Not in truth, but in vengeance for your father. Declare that Ramsay Bolton sheltered the assassin and paid for poison. Lannister wrath will slam upon the dread fort before snow melt." He shrugged at her startled stare. Bolton, ride south each spring to court favor. Let southern favor bite back. Sansa's breath caught. And when Bolton falls, then Northmen left adrift will seek new pack leaders. Your cousin at the Eyrie, perhaps. Or you. Greywater will guide those willing through hidden causeways to your call. She hesitated, weighing lies against justice. Poisoned truth for poisoned tyranny. Finally she dipped a quill made of swan bone, scrawled words that burned black across reed paper. I, Sansa Stark, smote the lion's cub, aided by Ramsay Snow, Oathbreaker, and Butcher. Let his flayed banners bear the blame. The North remembers, and the wolf bears fangs against flayskin and crossbow string alike. She signed beneath a drawn direwolf, hands steady. Days turned slippery in Greywater's drift. Sansa learned the marsh, the tug of undertow beneath reedweed, the drum of speckled heron wings at dawn. Mira taught her spear cast and net snare. Jojen whispered of green dreams, a white hart drinking from an ice-rimmed stream, a red tower toppling amid lightning strikes. Stranger adapted to swaying decks, standing wide-legged like a sailor. Yet even as the floating fortress cradled her, restless fire smoldered in her chest. One morning, as pale sun peeled mist from black water, a horn sounded thrice. Reed warriors swarmed lattice walks. Sansa, roused from fletching arrows, rushed to the lookout where Howland studied distant ripples. From fog emerged a skiff bearing a single figure in gray wool. When guards hailed him, he raised empty hands. His cloak, rain-heavy, revealed a pin shaped like a merman upholding a trident. Manderly of White Harbor, Howland answered open-handed, bidding scouts ferry the man ashore. He was old, cheeks reddened by sea wind, beard salted white. He knelt before Sansa the moment his boots touched deck. "Lady Stark," he rasped, voice thick with brine. "I am Maester Theomore of the Merman Court. My Lord Wyman bids me carry word. The North remembers. He asks if the White Wolf yet hunts." Sansa offered her hand, raising him. "Tell Lord Wyman the wolf stalks through fog," she said. "Winter is near and we gather for the kill." The Maester smiled, glancing about at drifting halls. "My lord sends more than words." He tugged a rope to haul a chest from the skiff, oak reinforced with iron. Within, nestled on straw, silver stags, jars of dried venison, bolts of undyed wool, and a short-hafted warhammer with a direwolf's head etched upon the steel. "Lord Manderly's brother Wyllis smiled this at your grandsire's call," Theomore explained. "May it break flayed shields anew." Sansa's eyes stung. She lifted the hammer, heavier than a dirk, but its weight felt right, balanced, as though made for her grip. She swung once, feeling winds hiss. Maester Theomore nodded approval. "My lord also begs you take this." From his cloak, he produced a folded parchment bearing a sea-green wax seal. Sansa broke it, revealing careful script. "Lady of Winterfell, I have bid bakers knead Frey flesh into pie, and sung false oaths to iron thrones, so my city might breathe another winter. My son still hostage, I wait with bared teeth. Should the wolf call, the merman will answer. Bring me Ned's girl and Bolton's head. Wyman Manderly, Lord of White Harbor." Sansa folded the letter with trembling hands. She turned to Howland Reed. "The pack gathers," she whispered. Reed inclined his head. "Then it is time to loose the letters." Ravens darkened the marsh sky that week, skimming south on silent wings. Each carried copies of Sansa's accusation toward Lannisport, Bitterbridge, Old Town, even Dorne. The last set flew north, bearing secret commands to Manderly, Karstark, Glover, and Serwyn. Radio the howl, sharpened steel. Jojen dreamt of bloody snow falling upon a pale bastion. Deepwood Motte, a tree of flayed skin burning. Dreadfort aflame. Sansa drank each vision like bitter wine, letting it steel her nerves. On the 10th night, a storm heaved Greywater's rafts so violently even strangers shivered. Lightning carved rifts in sky. Thunder cracked like splitting bone. Amid that fury, Mira shook Sansa awake. "Scout sight riders!" she yelled over wind. 10 at least, bearing flayed man banners. Stoke of urgency pulsed through Sansa's limbs. Ramsay's hunters, no doubt. Chasing whispers of Stark return. She buckled boiled leather armor, borrowed fisher scale plates overlapping like lily pads, then strapped the warhammer across her back. Under Howland's command, Greywater's outer rafts detached, drifting as decoys. Archers crouched beneath reed canopies. Sansa followed Mira into a narrow skiff, paddled by Jojen. Rain lashed their faces. They crept along an inlet where tall papyrus formed living walls. Through slitted reeds, Sansa spied torches bobbing atop a half-sunken dike. Riders in patchwork mail urged gaunt horses along uncertain footing, cursing the bog's drag. Their leader bore a flayed man pennon drooping in rain. He lifted a horn. "Stark bitch," he called, voice muffled by thunder. "We know you hide with frog-eaters. Show yourself, or we'll smoke this swamp till your skin peels." "Mandasimno." Mira's jaw tightened. Howland's silent command floated through the dark. "Hold." The intruders rode deeper, torches sputtering. One horse screamed as a foreleg plunged into a sinkhole. The rider toppled, armor clanging. Marsh waters swallowed his cry. Then Howland's signal rang, an owl's hoot thrice. Reed arrows hissed, invisible. 2 riders toppled, bolts sprouting from necks. Panic spread. Torches flailed, casting mad shadows. "Crows in the mist," someone shrieked. Another arrow severed the pennon pole. The flayed man banner fell into muck. Die bleeding. In terror, half the hunters turned to flee, but the causeway behind them cracked as hidden nets tugged posts into the water. Horses floundered. Humans screamed. Sansa felt her heart thrum but did not look away. This was the grim toll of wolves rising. The leader regained control, rallying 3 remaining men into a wedge. Blades drawn, and spurred toward the nearest reed wall. Mira's eyes met Sansa's. They leapt from the skiff onto slick mud. Sansa hefted the warhammer. Weight surged down her arms, muscles crying protest yet burning with purpose. She stepped free of reeds just as the first rider burst through. His horse reared at sudden groundlessness. Sansa swung upward, hammers flat, striking the beast's chest. It shrieked, falling sideways. The rider flew, armor scraping stones. Before he rose, she drove the hammer down upon his helm. Metal caved. Motion ceased. Rain hissed upon crushed steel. A second hunter lunged on foot, half-spear thrusting. Mira's blade flashed, slicing hamstring. He collapsed into knee-deep sludge. Sansa's hammer caught his jaw, snapping bone, sending him silent into swamp. The leader, seeing the tide turn, screeched a curse and spun his mount. But reeds parted behind him as Howland Reed himself rose, spear haft glinting. One thrust took the hunter through the gut, sliding from saddle. Howland yanked the corpse free, letting it sink. Only one rider remained, tangled in nets, horse shrilling. Jojen stepped from dusk, palm raised in peace. "Go north," he told the trembling youth. "Tell your lord the neck will flay flayers. Winter wolves gather." The youth, eyes wide, kicked free and galloped into shadow. Silence drowned the storm's dying rumble. Sansa's breath came ragged, rain-cooled sweat streaking her temples. Howland Reed wiped spear tip on moss. "The first blood of your war," he murmured, meeting her gaze. Sansa looked down at the hammer bleeding rust-brown rainwater. "Not the last," she answered. By dawn the corpses were gone, swallowed by bog. The captured horses, now riderless, grazed near stranger. Sansa chose a black mare to replace Mira's aged Garin, gifting reins with quiet thanks. As they prepared to ride, Howland approached bearing a small bundle. "Bolton will know now," he warned. "Word travels quick along dread banners. You must outpace his raven flights." He unfolded the bundle. Gray wool cloak edged in white fur. A direwolf sigil stitched bold upon the back. "Wear this when you wish the north to see its lady," he said. "Hide it until the moment strikes." Sansa brushed fingers across the embroidery, heart catching. "Who stitched it?" "My wife and daughters," he replied. They recalled the wolf maid who once rode to Moat Cailin in legend. Let stories breathe again. "Nah. Molly see." She clasped cloak to shoulders, fastening with a simple weirwood pin. Weight settled, not burdensome, but grounding. Before she mounted Stranger, Jojen pressed a swirl of carved bone into her palm. "A viper eating its tail," he explained. "Dream showed you holding this as walls of snow burned red. Perhaps good luck." Sansa tucked talisman under armor. "Thank you." Mira swung onto her new mare, grinning through grime. "We'll guide you past Moat Cailin," she offered. "Then travel west to rally Crannog spears. When you howl, we'll strike 'neath the reeds." Neshter Womahan. Sansa nodded. "I'll see you when snow flies." A last farewell to Howland, muted. A warrior's nod. And Stranger splashed northward, hooves drumming on hidden logways. Sansa glanced back once. Greywater Watch already gone, swallowed by fog. Then she faced the horizon where broken towers of Moat Cailin pierced morning gloom, and she rode. 2 days' hard travel brought her to the Causeway Fortress. The ancient stones lay cracked, mottled with lichen, their great walls sagging but still forbidding. Bolton men held the gatehouse. Over its rampart flapped the flayed man on pink field, lurid in dawn light. Sansa reined Stranger beneath a willow, surveying. A dozen guards manned parapets, crossbows resting across crumbled crenels. Supply wagons queued along the southern approach, each driver presenting writs to a yawning sergeant. Direct assault meant death. Subterfuge then. She dismounted, slipping beneath willow shade to change. Silk shift replaced boiled leather. Gray wolf cloak stuffed into saddlebag. She smeared mud across cheeks, twisted hair into a rough coil, and donned a frayed shawl pilfered from Bolton stores fallen in the marsh skirmish. In a pouch she placed a forged letter bearing Ramsay's wax seal, courtesy of Howland's artisans, ordering Moat Cailin's castellan to release 8 wagons of grain northward. Leading Stranger by reins, she joined the queue of wagons. The sergeant, stout and bored, barely glanced at her until her turn. "Name and cargo," he muttered. "Marius Stone, grain for Winterfell." Sansa replied, handing the letter. He cracked seal, scanned. His brow creased. 2 wagons only, letter says. His eyes flicked to Stranger. "Fine horse for a grain girl." Sansa forced a shy smile. "He belonged to my late master, my lord. I but deliver his tithe." The sergeant snorted. "Fine indeed. Show me the grain." Her heart stuttered. She had none. Then salvation arrived. Behind her, a real wagon lurched. Driver cursing wheels stuck in mud. Guards laughed, turning to shove. Sansa seized moment. She tugged Stranger forward, slipping past open gate while the sergeant's back turned. Inside the courtyard she veered left toward northern ramp, nodding at a dozing stable boy. 3 steps, 10. Heart hammering. No shouts followed. She led Stranger up the incline and out the far Sally Port, emerging onto the northern King's Road. Only when Moat Cailin shrank behind swamp reeds did she laugh, a breathless burst of relief. The road beyond was familiar in shape but scarred by war. Charcoal skeletons of holdfasts, toppled cairns where travelers once rested. Yet the air bore alpine chill, scent of pine and river ice. Home? She thought. Even the wounds smell sweet. She kept to forest margins, avoiding patrols. Twice she spotted Frey outrunners, pale towers, on blue cloak pins. She hid beneath snowy spruce until they clattered by, bickering about a lost patrol in the marsh. Word spreads, she mused, smirking. At twilight, she reached the gift. Rolling farmlands once tended by black brothers, now dotted with burnt crofts. Over a low ridge, she spied smoke curling from a barn still intact. Cautious, she crept closer. Children's laughter drifted, tinged with relief. She saw them, 3 little ones chasing a shaggy dog around mended pens. A gray-haired woman stirring stew at a kettle. No fluttering banners, no ironmen. Only survivors clinging to home. Hunger gnawed. She approached slowly, palms up. The dog barked. The woman whirled, brandishing ladle. "Stranger," Sansa called softly, thankful the hound's name doubled his greeting. "I seek warmth, nothing more." The elder narrowed eyes, studying mud-streaked face, plain shawl. Plenty of thieves on these roads, she snapped. Plenty of worse. Sansa reached into pouch, drawing out a single silver stag. I can pay, and share news. The woman accepted coin, nodding children aside. Over stew of turnip and hare, Sansa listened to their woes. Bolton men collecting tithes twice, Frey levy stealing daughters as camp followers, small folk praying for Manderley ships to bring hope. In return, she spoke of a king choked by rot, of power fracturing, of rumors that true-born wolves still howl. The children's eyes widened, the grandmother crossed herself. North remembers, she whispered. Sansa slept in loft above warm cows. Strangers settled with hay. At dawn the woman pressed a parcel of dried jerky and a pair of knitted gloves into her hands. Road grows colder, she said. If you meet those who fight, tell 'em old Nan's cousin at the gift still has salt and seed to spare. Sansa hugged her briefly. I will. 2 days later, a biting wind announced the last river. Its surface skinned with early ice, the waters whispered of wall snows melting to join greater tides. On its far bank rose white walls trimmed in green, White Harbor. But Sansa turned west along a deer track, leading to a hidden cove where gulls wheeled over 3 anchored cogs. At their prows painted mermen raised tridents swirling with foam. Sailors labored quietly, loading barrels of salt fish and crates of corals. The deck officer hailed as she rode from treeline. Lady Stark, he greeted, sweeping hat. Lord Wyman bid us watch for a girl on a giant's horse. A boat awaits 'neath the cliff. She dismounted, trusting stranger to graze, and followed. In a concealed grotto, a flat-bottomed skiff bobbed, sails furled. At its helm stood Wyman's younger son, Wyllis, an imposing man of prodigious girth. Cheeks cherubic, eyes merry beneath storm-furrowed brow. He bowed low, belly brushing rail. You honor White Harbor, my lady. Father regrets his bulk keeps him shoreside, but his heart rides with you. Sansa smiled, touched. We have all grown heavier in grief, she jested, though mine sits here. She tapped the hammer. Wyllis laughed thunderously. Good steel eases sorrow. He gestured to crates lining deck. 10 score crossbows, lengths of hemp, barley seed for spring rebirth, and 30 men sworn to die for the wolf. Faces turned toward her. Young, weathered, scarred, hopeful. She felt small beneath their devotion, yet a fierce flame surged too. They looked to her as she once looked to knights in story. We sail at dusk up the White Knife, Willa said. From there, overland to Barrowton. Avoid Bolton scouts, then strike at Winterfell when banners gather. Strike? She echoed. Mormont survivors travel with us, Wyllis explained. The Bear Islander Mage Mormont rides south by Raven's Call. She claims Karstark blades and Glover's muster. If true, we might field 2,000 before first frost. No. 2,000 against Winterfell's garrison. She weighed odds but would not flinch. And still Bolton has Frey support. Wyllis' smile turned wolfish. Not for long. Freys feast at Winterfell mid-moon. Invite them to table, lock the doors, and let old ghosts dine. The plan chilled and thrilled in equal measure. Sansa pictured her mother's red wedding, a memory soaked in grief, and felt vengeance twist inside like an iron nail heated in flame. But she tempered it with caution. We cannot become the monsters we fight, she murmured. Wyllis nodded, gentled. Aye. Then flay them not. Bind them and let Karstark justice fall. She sighed. Let's take Winterfell first. Justice will follow. The voyage upriver blossomed under furtive moonlight. Frost rims sparkled on reeds, water murmuring beneath hull. Sansa stood often at prow, hair whipping, cloak swirling. She traced constellations once taught by Master Luwin, the Ice Dragon's tail, the crown of winter, and prayed they still guided Starks. On the 4th night, Mage Mormont's column joined them near the lonely hills. The Islander matriarch, broad-shouldered in bearskin cloak, clasped Sansa's forearms with iron grip. You have your mother's eyes, she rumbled. And her fire, or so they tell. Sansa bowed. I carry mother's memory. Mage grunted approval. Then Carrie also bare fang. She presented a dagger of obsidian set in walrus bone. Dragon glass cuts more than whites. Sansa accepted, touched. Scouts soon confirmed Karstark riders, advancing from Karhold under Aelys Karstark, Robb's appointed heir after her king-slaying father's death. Black brothers sheltered her when Bolton hunted, Mage said. Now she rides to repay. Glover banners too, black and red chevron joined near Deepwood. Word of Talhart survivors spread. At each campfire Sansa spoke. Her voice, once timid, now rang clear. Of Ned Stark's honor, of Robb's fate, of Bolton treachery, of Lannister weakness. She did not mention the Strangler by name, but let rumors guide fear. She promised bread, baked with Manderley grain, justice carved by northern law, and snowbound safety for every daughter stolen by Southron greed. Where fear laced men's voices, she answered with stories of wolves who bury fangs in giants, yet sing to their pups. Slowly, dread turned to fervor. By first snowfall, they numbered near 3,000. Willis Manderley commanded center, Glover and Karstark wings formed wedge, Mormont spears guarded rear. Sansa rode before them on stranger, direwolf cloak billowing, hammer raised to salute. Cheers rolled like thunder across white fields. Winterfell loomed on the horizon, towers re-roofed by Bolton coin, walls patched with southern stone. Smoke rose from forges, flayed man banners cracked atop gatehouse. Scouts reported Ramsay absent, raiding Stannis remnants upon the King's Road. Roose Bolton held the castle with Frey cousins, 200 men, and 100 terrified smallfolk forced into service. Night-cloaked approach. Under cover of swirling snow, Manderley sappers tunneled beneath the east gate, planting kegs of lamp oil. Karstark rangers slit throats of pickets along Outer Bailey. At Moon's Peak Sansa, clad in wolf cloak and steel, stood among Mage's shield maidens behind a shield wall of oak. She could feel her mother's heart upon the battlements, her father's voice in the stones. A single horn blew, a long, mournful note. The sappers lit fuses. Flames raced along wicks, vanished beneath gate. A heartbeat. Roaring blast rocked night, timber gate spewing shards of iron. From snow rose the cry. Winterfell. Wolves charged. Glover and Karstark poured through smoking breach. Steel clashed, sparks painting night. Mage Mormont stormed a tower, bearcloak swirling. Sansa led shield maidens into courtyard, where Freymen scrambled half-dressed. Her hammer cracked helm after helm. Each fall thundered inside her skull like drums, but her arms refused to shake. Amid chaos she saw banners burning, pink flayed men curling in flame. She saw old Nan's cousin from the gift swing a pitchfork into a Frey's gut, shouting for Ned. She saw Jojen's dreaming viper talisman glow red in torchlight against her breast, and remembered prophecy. Walls of snow burning red. By dawn the fighting ceased. Roose Bolton lay slain in the great hall, throat split by Karstark blade while kneeling in surrender. North remembers. Frey prisoners knelt bound, stripped of titles. Small folk gathered in trembling clusters, unsure which lord ruled now. Sansa ascended the dais where once Joffrey taunted her father. She looked upon shattered arrow loops, cracked pillars, charred rafters. She raised the hammer, then lowered it gently beside her, as though placing a candle at a grave. "I'm Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell," she declared, voice carrying across stone and straw. Daughter of Eddard Stark and Catelyn Tully, sister of Robb and Bran and Arya. The North has bled, but our heart beats yet. No man shall kneel to flayed banners again. No child shall starve for Southron coin. Her gaze swept faces. Fear, hope, awe. Kneel if you would stand as Northmen reborn. One by one they knelt. Karstark, Glover, Manderley, Mormont, Smith, Steward, stableboy. Tears blurred her sight. Wind howled through broken shutters like a direwolf's cry. When silence settled, she turned to the weirwood heart tree in the courtyard, its red leaves crimson against new snow. Beneath she knelt alone, placing hammer and dagger at its roots. "I have taken lives to save lives," she whispered to the old gods. "Judge me as you will, but guide me still." Snowflakes drifted, melting on her skin like blessings. That eve, as cooks roasted oxtail and Manderley minstrels tuned lutes, a horn sounded atop the gatehouse. Sansa hurried, wet footprints trailing, to see a ragged column approaching down the King's Road. Rag-clad, weary, but alive. At its head rode a gaunt direwolf-sigilled knight, leading a great white direwolf, whose fur shimmered under torchlight. Behind, upon a shaggy garron, slouched a boy of 14 with legs too thin and eyes too old. Beside him walked Hodor, gentle giant carrying Bran's litter. To their flank strode Arya Stark, hair cropped, eyes feral, hand resting on the hilt of a slender sword etched with dancing dragons. Sansa's knees buckled. They saw her silhouette atop the wall and reined in. Arya's lips curved into a shaky grin. Bran lifted trembling hand. The white direwolf threw back its head and howled. The sound leapt across courtyards, echoing through every hall. Wolves within Winterfell answered, stone wolves, iron wolves, wolves of memory. Howl layered upon howl until the very night trembled. Sansa hurried down stone steps, cloak billowing, hammer abandoned. Brothers and sisters collided in snow, arms wrapping, tears steaming. Ghost paced around them, brushing noses against stranger who snorted acceptance. Behind, Karstark and Glover watched. Manderley wiped eyes. Mage Mormont crossed arms with small smile. Howland Reed emerged from among guards, unseen but smiling too. He had slipped inside with wave caps, just as Greywater itself. Bran looked up at Sansa, eyes reflecting heart tree flames. "The wolf pack is back," he whispered. "Winter is here, but we are together." "Nempe." Sansa kissed his brow. "Together," she echoed. Days blurred into rebuilding. Snow deepened, covering scars. Maester Theomore worked with ancient scrolls to prove Bran's claim as Lord of Winterfell, but Bran insisted his sister lead until he healed. Arya trained squires and stable boys in swordplay. Her laughter rang strange but bright. Manderley ships sailed north with grain. Karstarks fortified the Dreadfort. Glover axes patrolled the Wolfswood. Ravens still carried rumors of Sansa the Kingslayer. Cersei raged, demanding Stark heads. But the realm fractured. Lannister coffers empty, Tyrell roses wilting beneath doubt. Stannis lingered in shadow. Even the Iron Islands muttered of Wolftide returning. One crisp dawn, Sansa climbed the tallest tower, direwolf cloak snapping behind. Below, Winterfell bustled. Smiths hammering, children skating upon iced ponds. In the Godswood, Bran sat beneath heart trees' red leaves. Eyes rolled white in Green Seer's vision. Arya sparred with Mira. Ghost napped beside stranger. The sight filled Sansa with a fierce, aching joy. A flutter drew her gaze. A raven perched upon parapet. Wings dusted silver. A scroll drooped from its leg, sealed in black wax bearing a crescent moon. She freed it, heart quickening. "Lady of Winterfell," it read. "The wall has fallen to dead things. Jon marches south with wildlings, seeking shelter. Hold fast, Winter Sister. The last battle begins." Signed, Samwell Tarly, Castle Black, Ruins. Sansa closed her eyes, breathing steam. War had not ended. Winter's true teeth still awaited. Yet she felt no dread. Only the steady hammering of a wolf's heart. She descended the tower, letter clenched. In the courtyard she met her siblings. Bran's far-off eyes swirled back to mortal brown. Arya halted mid-swing. She handed them the scroll. They read in silence, snowflakes gathering in their hair. Bran's voice, calm as falling ash. "Then the pack must hunt together again." Sansa nodded. "We will open our gates to Jon and every man who walks behind him. We will stand as father once stood when cold winds raged." She looked to Arya. "Sharpen swords." To Mira. "2. Send Raven south. The wolves stand ready." To Bran. "Guide us." They dispersed, swift as arrows loosed from a northern yew. Sansa lingered, lifting gaze to sky where snow fell in lazy spirals. Somewhere beyond those clouds, bells of a foreign city had long ceased tolling. their echoes swallowed by winter. The girl who poured poison into a king's cup had forged a new crown of ice, fire, and unbroken bone. She touched the warhammer at her back, felt dragonglass dagger at hip, and strode into the courtyard where smoke rose, steel rang, and the north remembered. The road ahead bristled with deathless foes, but the pack was whole, and a wolf pack on the hunt feared no storm. Ka! Snow whispered against the ramparts as Winterfell stirred to war once more. In the pale dawn after Samwell's raven, the castle seemed to inhale, stone lungs flexing beneath layers of ancient frost, while every hallway filled with fast-moving shapes. Masons hurried to seal gaps in the repaired inner wall. Smiths hammered links of raw iron into long chains, and children lugged wicker baskets brimming with dragonglass arrowheads up twisting towers that smelled of fresh pine pitch. The air tasted of poppy smoke and hot steel, of broth simmered thick with barley to feed those who would soon fight on empty bellies. Beneath it all beat the pulse of something old and urgent, a pack's collective heart, thundering in every throat. Sansa stood in the center of the yard, encircled by clangor and shouting, cloak hitched at the shoulders, with fresh wolf's head clasps of blackened bronze. She wore a jerkin quilted in layers of dark gray wool and supple duskin breeches, garb for command, not finery. Farmers and fisherfolk trickled through the main gate in weary columns, leading thin cows and clucking hens, cheeks chapped raw from the cold. Each person was quickly counted, given a hot cup, and led to quarters that had not housed so many souls since the harvest fairs of her girlhood. She called their names into the parchment rolls. A mother's roll, Maester Lewin once said, and as she wrote she felt that long-ago innocence still alive somewhere under the scars. The North is family, her father had taught. In the hour of the wolf, every hearth becomes a heartbeat. Arya darted past, trailing a swarm of boys and girls scarcely taller than swords, all armed with blunted sticks. She barked lessons. Hold your balance on packed snow. Shift weight like water. 2 direwolf pups. The first litter ghost had sired with a captured she-wolf, bounded at her heels, growling playful challenges. In Arya's eyes, Sansa found something younger and yet fiercer than ever before, a spark that no faceless god had quenched. Bran watched from a sledge of woven spruce boughs drawn by patient oxen. His skin looked thinned by visions, veins faintly violet beneath, but a hint of red oak fire glowed in his frozen gaze. Sometimes his lips moved without sound, as if speaking to winds that blew between worlds. Behind him towered Hodor, enormous shoulders draped in a new bearskin gifted by Mage Mormont. He hummed a kind of lullaby, the tune wove with the creak of the sledge so gently that even anxious horses quieted. Sansa's war council gathered that night in the great hall, where heat from the restored hearths curled steam from cloaks and melted stray flakes, clinging to the eyebrows of men and women who had ridden hard to arrive before moonrise. Manderly captains rolled maps across a table stout enough for giants. Karstark outriders laid strips of tanned hide, bearing inked reports of Bolton deserter movements. The hall smelled of juniper and pine resin, for the old banners had been fed to the flames and new ones sewn from unbleached wool. White direwolf, silver trout, roaring bear, black pinecone of house glover. No pink men flayed beneath any crescent moon. At the high seat, Sansa clasped fingers so they would not seem to tremble. Her voice, when it came, rang like the bite of an axe upon ice. Jon Snow leads whomever survived the wall's fall, she told them. He carries wildlings, knights watch brothers, and broken lords no longer sworn to any crown. They will be weary, half-starved. We must hold the road south of the last river until they reach us, or their trek dies beneath the open sky. Neanasitra. Lord Galbart Glover tugged his beard. Our scouts saw smudges of torchlight near last hearth 3 nights back, he said. If the dead broke through the Umberhold, they'll drift east and south along the woods. They hunt warmth, wolves and men. He looked to Bran. My lord, do the trees whisper where their line runs? Bran's pupils dilated until little color remained. They cross the Umber's former pasture lands even now, he murmured. 8 without shore. Fires gutter beneath the snow as they pass, but the flames remember. We have time still. See the moonwax once more, then they will stand before Winterfell's walls. Bye. Chills scampered across every spine. Mage Mormont pounded the table with a fist thick as gnarled oak. Then we take the fight farther north, she declared. Meet them at the ridgelines and channel their numbers toward the eastern bluffs. A wall of rock will slow even these corpses. Waelys Manderly shook his head, cheeks trembling. Too easy for the horde to flow round and swallow us piecemeal. We must remain where towers and catapults give us bite. Dackler. Mira Reed stepped from the shadows of a pillar, cloak dripping thawed sleet. Greywater nets can ensnare a flank, she said, but only if we anchor our line between rivers. The white knife on one side, the shivering forest on the other, a natural funnel. Debate rolled like thunder. Sansa listened, sifted, weighed. At last, she traced a line across the map between two charcoal ridges, just north of the King's Road. Here, she decided, a day's march from Last Hearth. We'll entrench half our strength behind earthen berms, drive sharpened stakes to break cavalry of ice. Catapults atop the hills will lob pitchpots loaded with oil. If the whites burn, they break. And when they break, the hammer falls. Karstark riders, Glover axes, Mormont spears. Arya's scout pack will harry stragglers. Silence fell. The plan seemed both desperate and clever enough to tempt survival. When no one disagreed, Sansa dipped her quill in ink, the color of midnight, and wrote the commands that would fill the snow with trenches and stakes by sundown tomorrow. After the council drifted to their duties, she remained alone beneath the roasting boar that spun like a fading memory above the coals. The hall emptied save for Bran and Ghost, who settled at her feet. A fresh draft whistled through arrow slits, rattling newly hammered shutters. Bran spoke so softly, she almost missed his words. Father would be proud. She stared into firelight, watching fat pop and hiss. Father never imagined his daughters would need warcraft, she said bitterly. He hoped they might not. Bran's ghostly hand touched hers. But he prepared us anyway, just by being who he was. We measured weeks by his honor. We forged ourselves in its shape. She squeezed his fingers until warmth jolted through her stone-cold skin. Tell me we'll survive. Bran's eyes turned distant again, but a ghost of a smile flickered. Tomorrow isn't shown whole, only shards. But in the shards I see children running through green grass on a warm day. I think that must be after. Children need songs, she whispered. Then you must live to teach them. The trenchworks erupted with frost-crusted earth under a harvest of iron spades and pickaxes. Men and women dug until their knuckles split and bled, then wrapped rags and dug again. Mage Mormont directed ox teams to drag felled pines to the ridgeline. Waelys oversaw barrels of pitch rolled up sled ramps and lashed behind lip-high walls. Crannog netters wove reeds into trip snare mats that could tangle even deer, then soaked them in lamp oil. Karstark smiths chamfered stakes until they gleamed like fangs. Every beat of the wind carried hammer clang, shouted orders, the whistle of arrows being tested against makeshift targets. Above it all hung the beating heart of fear transformed by labor into purpose. On the second morning, a horn on the outer towers wailed thin and high. Sansa strode from the battlements and saw shapes crawling toward Winterfell from the west, not the enemy, but survivors. Dozens, then hundreds, wildling clans in patchwork furs, black brothers in ashes-stained cloaks, even mothers with newborns strapped warm against bare skin. At their head trudged Tormund Giantsbane, red beard stiff with ice, one horn broken upon his belt. Indistinct but unmistakable on a roan horse beside him, rode Jon Snow, cloak tattered, sword strapped across his back in a makeshift leather scabbard that looked gnawed at its edges. Sansa ran the stairs two at a time, Arya racing beside her. They reached the gatehouse platform as the drawbridge lowered. Jon looked up, surprise flaring like dawn across exhaustion. Ghost's ears pricked. He gave a quake of joy that rattled thick winter fur. Jon's voice cracked when he greeted them in the yard. Sansa, Arya. Words failed. They embraced until mail links ground like distant thunder. Tears leaked, and froze along jawlines. Then Jon steadied. Duty, reclaiming posture. The wall. It was worse than we feared. We lost Eastwatch, then Castle Black. The Night King rides a dragon of frost. Steam puffed from his lips, as though he exhaled an entire world of dread. Sansa guided him toward roaring hearths. Warm yourself, then speak. We've dug trenches. We'll funnel them between hills by the last river. Jon's eyes lit with reluctant admiration. You planned a kill zone? Father taught us how to hunt, she replied, almost smiling. Then she saw the raw grief graven beneath his skin, the weight of names unvoiced in this yard, because there was no room for more ghosts. Her smile faltered. Who did we lose? Dolorous Ed Day, Bowen Marsh, half the brothers, Beric Dondarrion, again, Jon whispered. His gaze fell to Arya. Gendry lives. He's forging spears tipped with the dragon glass. Sam hauled south before the library burned. They ride behind with Davos, 2 days out. He turned to Sansa. Daenerys sails toward White Harbor with 2 dragons. One of them, well, one remains. The other was taken. Sansa braced on the memory of charred wings above King's Landing stories, and now she conjured the reflection in rhyme. Wings of hoarfrost, eyes like shattered sapphires. Then we must hold anyway. Jon's lips trembled into half a grin. I know. He gripped her forearm. You've become what the North needed. She remembered Joffrey clawing at his throat, and felt that old black weight shift. I became who I needed to be, she corrected. The front lines solidified by torchlight. In the gathering dusk before the battle, Jon insisted on walking the trenches with Sansa, Arya, Bran riding a small sled, and the Manderly captains. He listened to each sentry recount where oil jars were stacked, where fallback points lay, nodding approval. At the final stake line berm, he paused. Sansa, should the line fail, you ride south. The North cannot lose you. She stared him down stubbornly. Were you planning to walk south when the wall fell? That was different. Because you're a man. Her voice sharpened like winter breath on glass. Because the songs still pretend queens and girls shouldn't bleed in the mud. She jabbed a stake with her dirk, splintering frost. I did not poison a boy king to survive just to run from dead ones. Jon sighed, then allowed a flicker of rueful respect. Fair. But if the center breaks, retreat to the Godswood. The fires there won't go out. Bran says the heart tree's roots remember the warmth of creation. Then let's make sure the center doesn't break, she said. That night in the crypts they shared a final council. Gendry arrived, cheeks aflame from a forced ride, delivering bundles of sweat-stained cloth that clinked. He had reforged farm scythes into glaives, hammered horseshoes into broad hoes tipped with dragonglass. Even children would not lack a blade. Though Sansa prayed they would never raise them. Bran spoke in ripples. The Night King hunts me, he said quietly. He is drawn to memory, for to forget the light is to reign in perfect cold. If I sit beneath the heart tree, he will come. His mind will see where mine sits. Jon's answer thundered against stone bolts. Too dangerous. Arya added steel. Let him hunt my shadow instead. Sansa, though, waited differently. If we know where he goes, she reasoned, we can strike him there. Kill the head, maybe the army dies with it. She saw the plan form, Bran as bait, Theon and his ironborn archers ringed beneath the weirwood, Ghost and Nymeria's returning pack prowling the tree line. Arya unseen, blade of Valyrian steel stolen from Littlefinger when he perished in the Eyrie, waiting for the single stroke that could decide everything. She met Arya's eyes, and with one look they understood. A pact of sisters, each trusting the other to fight where needed. So it was decided. Dawn birthed like a bloodless wound, light the color of polished bone reflecting off endless drifts. Sansa woke to horns groaning across the valley. From the eastern ridge she saw the enemy at last. A gleaming tide of brittle white and shadowed leather. Armor frosted over veins of silver-blue ice, weapons the color of moonlit glass. They moved without drum or whistle. No clank, no hoarse cry, only the hush of a blizzard that walked. Snow around them refused to swirl, as if frightened. High above their vanguard flapped giant shapes. Undead giants in patched furry skins. lugging tree trunks studded with spikes, white mammoths dragging siege sledges, pale spiders as large as hounds gating across drifts on long hair-like legs. Worse still, at the army smoking center, a rider upon a dragon of milky scales circled once surveying, then vanished behind a bank of storm cloud that no natural winter could conjure. Wherever its wings beat, the snow glowed with inner blue. Sansa could not breathe for a moment. Then she steadied. Light the trenches. Signal arrows soared from 3 Fletcher's towers. Flames burst along braided rope buried beneath snow. The front of the Spider River lines blossomed in pillars of orange, raw fuel carried from White Harbor's stores, igniting like the sun at sunrise. Stake walls glowed ember red. Pitch pots rained from catapults, shattering in sheets of liquid fire. Whites at the fore ignited, shriveled, collapsed. Yet even as they burned, more climbed across and through their disintegrating kin, ignoring flame-slick limbs. From behind shields, the North loosed arrows. Dragonglass tips struck white torsos and heads, blossoming cracks that raced across blackened bone before shattering them into snow. Sansa cheered when stakes served as pivot points for Mormont's shield maidens vaulting into white ranks, maces spinning. Mage Mormont fought like an avalanche given teeth, body blocking the breach as men behind her fed fresh torches to a moat now boiling pitch. For one heartbeat, hope felt real. Then a shrill crackling shriek cut the sky. The ice dragon burst through clouds, exhaled a torrent not of flame but of crystalline shards, so cold the air itself screamed. Where the breath struck the burning trench, blue frost raced, extinguishing flame in a wave of white that hissed into silence. White ranks poured through. Sansa's blood chilled. Catapults to the dragon, Karstarks, cavalry to flank left breach. Horns answered. Horsemen surged, banners snapping. Glover axe dancers leapt from berms into the sea of dead. Flickers of Valyrian steel along the parapets traced arcs through half-light. Jean's sword Longclaw, Brienne's oathkeeper glimmering where she guarded Podrick and a knot of small folk. Yet the host was endless. For each corpse shattered, 2 more crawled over the ridge. Hours seemed to pass in breaths. Sansa found herself beside Mira at the northernmost ditch, hammer caked in yellow ice, arm quivering but relentless. She flattened a spider creature, crashed its skull with the heel of the hammer, splattering crystals that tinkled like bells. Mira's spear flickered, yanking one white free of a Glover pikeman's back. Steam from bodies rose so thick they fought in fog laced with ghostly shapes. A ripple of horns swelled. 3 low notes from the godswood. Sansa's heart seized. The Night King had appeared. "Hold here," she shouted at Mira. Then she sprinted, boots slipping on half-melted snow, ribs heaving as she clambered along the ridge toward the castle. Across the field, she saw Jon likewise break from ranks, ghost bounding ahead. Arya was already gone into shadow. Behind them, Wireless bellowed at catapult crews to retarget the ice dragon. One lucky shot hammered a flaming boulder into its flank. Fire flickered, but the creature shrieked and banked, wings shredded yet still airborne. Sansa vaulted a broken ladder over the moat, pounded through Winterfell's yard where wounded screamed in lines for the maester's triage, and burst into the godswood. Snow-laden boughs drooped over a clearing washed in eerie blue. There stood Bran beneath the red leaves, eyes rolled white, posture mild as snowfall. Around him, Theon and Ironborn archers looked already dead, frost creeping across shields, one by one falling to their knees. Before them, moving with silence that weighed more than thunder, walked the Night King. Crown of cracked ice, sword of glass, eyes that swallowed all color. He lifted one hand. Shattered tips of arrowheads and spears shivered in midair, reversing to impale their owners. Theon charged in a final cry. Spear leveled. The Night King parried with languid ease, snapped it in 2, drove jagged shards through Theon's chest. The boy who had once betrayed Winterfell crumpled, breath icing on his lips. Sansa stopped at the edge of clearing, rage buckling her knees. A shape flitted between heart tree roots, shadow in motion. Arya somersaulted from branch above, cat-like, Valyrian dagger glinting. But before blade found heart, the Night King spun, catching her wrist in icy grip. His other hand clasped her throat, hoisting her. Frost spidered across Arya's skin. Her eyes bulged, blade wobbling. Bran's voice spoke through still dead winter. Now. Wind poured from the high branches. Red leaves burst from heart tree limbs, swirling like a storm of blood. Sansa felt them brush her cheeks, warm as newborn flesh. Each leaf caught fire as it dropped, embers blowing into the Night King's pale crown. In the distraction, Arya let go of her dagger, flipping it into her free hand. She drove it up toward the Night King's breast. But the blade scraped off an unseen shield of frozen magic. He tightened his grip, and ice raced along her jaw. Sansa screamed, charging forward. She swung the war hammer in a two-handed arc toward the Night King's sword arm. The blow landed with a splintering crack. Ice buckled. The arm canted sideways at an impossible angle. The Night King released Arya, who tumbled to snow, gasping. Frost dust cascaded from the break like diamond rain. He turned to Sansa, expressionless. Yet the world seemed to lurch beneath his gaze. The air burned with a frozen smell of copper as he lifted his good hand. From behind Bran's sled, Ghost lunged, jaws gaping red-mawed. He clamped onto that lifted wrist, teeth crunching through crystal flesh. Before the Night King could turn, Bran's own hands, guided by some ancient force, rested on the roots of the heart tree. A blinding surge of white wind gusted up the trunk, through Bran, into Ghost, into Sansa's hammer, turning the iron head to blazing blue. She swung again, yelling a word she did not know. Old tongue of first men. Hammer met chest. The crystal of his armor shattered outward in a ring as quiet as snowfall. Shards spinning. A fissure spidered from the impact, racing across the Night King's form. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. He looked almost at peace as the fissure reached his crown. Then his body burst into 1,000 glittering fragments that settled like new snow at Sansa's boots. Across the field whites collapsed in waves. Strings cut. Giants froze mid-stride and keeled into trenches. Mammoths toppled like felled trees. The ice dragons shrieked once before disintegrating into a cyclone of powder that drifted harmlessly across charred stakes. Silence devoured Winterfell, save for the crackle of distant burning pitch. Sansa stood trembling, hammer glowing ember blue until the color faded. Arya knelt, coughing, soaking cloak around shoulders. Bran's eyes fluttered back to brown. Ghost licked frost from wounded jaw. And as the leaves finished falling, dawn peeked behind a bank of gold cloud, painting the godswood in amber. They buried Theon beneath the heart tree roots. Hodor carved words into the bark above. He died a Stark. Crannog knots formed wreaths around his spear pieces. Ironborn wept strange briny tears they pretended were sleep. The dead of the night were burned outside the walls. Northmen, free folk, sworn brothers, and songs for each filled the morning sky until it rang like distant horns. Snowmelt trickled through trenches that now smelled of sap and smoke, not rot. Jon stood beside Sansa on the battlements where the frost began to thaw. "We won," he said softly, as though tasting the words. She brushed stray hair from wind-scorched cheeks. "For now, the south still festers." Jon nodded. "Daenerys lands in 3 days. 2 dragons, 8,000 unsullied, fewer Dothraki than before. Cersei sits the throne still. And Lannister justice waits for me." Jon met her gaze. Justice or vengeance? Sometimes they are twins. She inhaled the scent of pine sap and soot. "But I would rather rebuild than burn." Her eyes swept the yard where children chased the pups again. Father's seat must remain a place where life begins, not ends. Jon leaned on the wall, gaze distant. "We will need new words for this story. Songs that remember the women who saved us." "Let the singers come," she said. "Let them spend a decade gathering all the names." The sun broke full over the horizon, turning shattered ice glass into pearls across the field. She touched Jon's arm. "Go tend the living. I'll join soon." He descended, cloak swirling. Sansa lingered alone, warhammer resting against stone at her hip. Below, carpenters already stripped siege engines for lumber. Blacksmiths quenched cherry-red blades into barrels of snowmelt. The fortress hummed a different music now. Not cries of battle, but hammers shaping thresholds. People mending, children laughing. Denaus,